Winter. Vorbim de aici. Da. Nu are rost să mai ridică. Bună ziua și bun venit.
Hello and welcome to this panel on a very, unfortunately, still very current topic after 1 year and a half of pandemic life and other aspects related to the possibility to define healthcare as a strategic component of the national and international security environment. I would like to start by introducing the panelists. Dr. Raed Arafat, State Secretary, Head of the Emergency Department. Dr. Cristian Bouchoi, a member of the EU Parliament and chairman of the Committee on Industry, Research and Energy. Mr. Andrei Baciu, State Secretary of the Ministry of Health. He's an expert in public health policies. He's in charge with the vaccination process. And last but not least, General Daniel Ioniță, an expert in cyber security strategies and currently manager with CyberMed Infoworld Romania. 1 year after our prior debates with some of the guests we had last year with us here today, and unfortunately 1 year after the pandemic, we see the topic still so painfully current despite the developments in time. After, obviously, the development of the vaccines, which is the main and the fundamental ally in every pandemic fight, but we also speak of less pleasant aspects. On the one hand, the natural ones related to the virus evolution, to the development of new viral forms, and on the other hand, with the most unpleasant extreme, which is related to the rejection of vaccines in society. We've seen lately quite many reactions. These are many different situations, many different challenges, and our guests today are most able to provide us with updated information, and therefore I have the honor to invite Dr. Raed Arafat to take the floor. Thank you very much. I believe the answer to your question should be maybe seen from multiple viewpoints. If the healthcare system has become a strategic component of the national and international security environment, in order for this to become it, we have to admit it is a part of it. Until we, the political part, admit that the healthcare component is part of this system, it means that everything will be outside the national security system, outside the impact of the healthcare system on this field. But let's see what we have been facing within 1 year and a half. So the chain of supply, we needed that, and we are not talking about Romania, we are talking about much better prepared countries, which, however, could not find what they needed when they needed it. We became the victims of speculation, and at some point even blackmail. when it comes to certain materials, equipment needs for the healthcare system. Prices increased by 10 times, agreements cancelled at the latest second, agreements concluded with faraway countries where you didn't know who your discussion partner was. This is why, well, obviously, if we want to think of the healthcare system as a component of the national and international security system, we will have to think of how we tackle certain vital components of the system at European level, at NATO level, and see that some things, even if they are more costly, they will have to remain in an area where we know we can have easy access to them, so that we are not one way or another under threat that we cannot obtain them when we need them, because at the manufacturing place there are other needs. I will give you an example. Drug precursors. There has been a brief but very important moment during the pandemic when the two major exporters, countries exporting drug precursors, India and China, decided they will no longer export. That means we are completely dependent. That means that if we believe that the healthcare system is a national security system, we should prevent such situations in the future. The same thing for equipment, ventilators. Companies from Europe, from the USA, from other countries are manufacturing ventilators in Asia. It was difficult for us to obtain ventilators or different other equipment, and now we return to our capacity to manage such situations, and we discovered that we were not prepared. We did not have the capacity to transport at the time when everybody wants to transport materials from one place. Obviously, you will not find anyone in the market to transport. Obviously, there will be delays. Obviously, the manufacturer will prioritize, especially since availability is limited and there are only 2 or 3 countries in the market manufacturing such products. So again, if we believe that the healthcare system is part of the national security system, then our approach should change. Let's say it is, we already have this healthcare system as a component, although it isn't. How do we tackle this in a country? How do we tackle the healthcare system and the healthcare provision in a country? This is part of our perception of the healthcare system, and I will give you very clear examples. We have been facing with huge deficits, huge gaps in human resources. There were different underlying causes. One of them is the lack of long-term human resource planning in the healthcare system. And another cause, which was created by us, especially one of them in Romania in 2010, when we suddenly cut healthcare personnel wages by 25%, despite the warnings. I was Secretary of State back then in the Ministry of Health, and we warned back then that we will have a huge drain. And what happened? We lost specialists. We lost emergency specialists, anesthetists, all the people we need in the pandemic. People, hundreds of doctors who left to other countries and serve there without any problem. And there are different approaches at European level which meant pressure on the healthcare systems. One of them is the directive on the working time, when this was adopted due to the pressure of unions and so on, the healthcare system was included without planning, without understanding that it was a long-term thing. When doctors suddenly had their working hours reduced to 48 per week, obviously we instantly created a shortage of human resources. How can we replace it? It was not possible in Romania because with lower salaries, lower wages, you could not attract staff from other countries, as it happened with other countries which attracted Romanian doctors. So they could be able to close such shortages very quickly, while other countries were not able to. In the future, such matters must be better analyzed, because the healthcare system is not a commodity. It is a matter of security, and eventually we are talking about population security. We are talking about eventually about regional security or global security. Now let's see, can the pandemic lead to security issues? Yes, and that was obvious. We have seen cyber attacks in hospitals in Romania, in other countries, and they became more intense in certain areas. The vaccination program became a target in the social media, in different networks, so that the vaccination campaign should fail, and there were multiple actors, national and international, at different levels. So, in my opinion, the healthcare system is a component of the national security environment, and it should be, but in order to have it as such, we should recognize it as such. For example, intensive care departments. If you go to an emergency hospital, what are the criteria for us to employ doctors? The number of beds. Well, this is an indicator, but not the most important. We need to look at the activity. We have no redundancy. Employment, people are employed according to funds and daily activities, but if you believe this is a national security system, shouldn't we have some redundancy? Shouldn't we have some exceeding capacity despite the bigger costs? And how do you finance this? Maybe besides the financing through the insurance system, we need to identify additional funding, because it was obvious we need such capacities, additional capacities during a pandemic, for example, and we didn't have it because we need such bigger capacity, because it takes time to train an emergency doctor. It takes years, and then the thinking for the future should generate additional capacities, even if the cost will be higher, and then indeed we will be able to say that the healthcare system became part of the national security sector, because we recognize it as such. Otherwise, to conclude, the system should be, although it isn't there yet, because we have not yet clearly recognized that this is what we want. We recognize this and that as elements of infrastructure, but we do not recognize that there is a need for a new thinking in the healthcare system, which should remove it from the commercial thinking and turn it into a sector of national security, which is organized. Obviously, it does have a commercial component, but it also needs a basic component which should be there regardless the market conditions, regardless the commercial competition conditions, and I believe this is a topic which should take at least one day to discuss. Thank you. Thank you. As a former dean of the Faculty of Medicine, I have been facing this problem of the timing, and we are still under a legislative void because we haven't been able to harmonize the labor code and the education law in the medical studies. We are still facing this problem where the doctor is also teaching, and we already see working hours imposed, student internships are strangely organized. We see people performing surgery in the morning and then teaching surgery in the afternoon. This is ridiculous. This is impossible, and this is a matter of security because medical studies faculties and universities did provide and can provide response. And here I think we are entering a very delicate discussion. We have with us by video conference Dr. Cristian Bouchoi, a member of the EU Parliament, and it is my pleasure to invite him to take the floor. Hello. Thank you. I hope the connection works. I'm happy to be invited in such a wonderful event. I'm sorry I can't be there in person. I had to join the Prime Minister in counties in the western part of the country to identify together with our colleagues solutions to manage the political situation. I wouldn't call it crisis. The topic you proposed is very important and it has become urgent and political decision makers have become aware of it with the pandemic. Minister Raed Arafat explained very clearly the challenges all countries have been facing, even the powerful countries which have much more resources than Romania in the first weeks of the pandemic. To ensure materials, equipment, ventilators, and better organize their healthcare systems so that they are able to cope with this challenge, unprecedented challenge at international level. And we have seen some lessons during this pandemic, and they should see us better prepared in the future, both at European and national levels. Right now, we are designing and implementing rapid response mechanisms, which should be much better adapted in case the pandemic extends and increases, which I hope won't happen, or to be better prepared in the future in case of other similar events. The European Union EU for Health program, I am a rapporteur there, provides funds to better organize the common coordinated response in the future. There will also be a reserve, a strategic reserve of materials, equipment at European level. There is also the idea to train and have a pool of healthcare personnel at European level. Obviously, if we are talking about a challenge which needs to be tackled across Europe, that would be more difficult. But if we are talking about punctual difficulties, they can help a certain member state to cope with the public health issue. I am in contact with the representatives of the health ministry in Romania with Mr. Arafat, Mr. Baciu, to see what we can do in Romania to have in place such functional mechanisms. However, beyond this crisis, beyond emergencies, beyond current or future pandemics, there are also other medium and long-term challenges which can have a national security component or security component in general. We are talking first of all about the sustainability of healthcare systems. This is an older discussion which has obviously been a matter of concern for national governments and European institutions, because obviously with the success of healthcare systems, with the increase in the life expectancy, we have a population which happily lives longer, but it also has different healthcare challenges, and this means pressure on two large systems, the healthcare system and the retirement system. So we need to redesign the healthcare system, the funding, the cost efficiency principles, the quality of services, the sustainability of such services. We need to redesign all these, because otherwise we fall victim of our own success, and within some years or decades it will be impossible for us to finance according to the needs.
There's also the challenge to access to treatment, access to healthcare. This can also entail a security component, because apart from the fact that of course people wait to have access to services, they also wait to have equal access to state-of-the-art treatment, to innovation, to quality medical care. A certain dissatisfaction of non-access, of course, can cause trouble, can cause protests in the future that of course have to be taken into account. So this also has to make us think of a mechanism to reduce inequalities, as I said, equal access of patients to state-of-the-art and treatment that can be available. And of course, last but not least, Raed mentioned, Mr. Arafat mentioned the issue on digitalization and cybersecurity. The health systems, European national health systems, need to be digitized. This will bring a great benefit both to the healthcare managers, because they'll have a better image, they will be able to act more efficiently, they will allocate better the resources. But with the mobile health solutions, with the e-health solutions, robotics, and all the other aspects of technological advancement, patients will be treated better as a result of that. And this is accepted, of course, by everybody. And the digitalization of societies in general, of economy and of the health system, is a reality that can no longer be questioned. Artificial intelligence, of course, brings great opportunities to better treat patients. Telemedicine gives us the possibility that the patient at home or in a surgery can have access to a remote consult from the best well-trained specialists on that case that can handle their treatment. Of course, this brings advantages but risks as well. The cybersecurity incidents related to data theft, confidentiality, the confidentiality of patient details that of course have to stick to the strictest confidentiality rules. But along with the 5G technologies, we will see that important data that so far was difficult to transfer will be able to will be transferred in a second. 4G is not just a quicker 5G. You know this very well. I see very many specialists in this renowned conference. This will bring a revolution with respect to data transfer, access to internet, developing the Internet of Things. We can already speak of other challenges. What we may have seen in certain movies, that through a cyber attack, the pacemaker of a citizen can be stopped, of a decision maker or of any citizen on this planet. The fact that through a hack, the life of a patient can be jeopardized. That will be operated on by a robot, programmed by a doctor, but for precision operated by a robot. This will bring needs to take very special action. So apart from the crisis that is very important and that has to teach us to be more prepared for the future, apart from the medium and long-term needs of the system and the need to shift the paradigm on how we fund, how we allocate resources, how we manage, how we strike partnerships with the private environment, we also have this great part of digitalization that has a very important security component. And I once again congratulate New Strategy Center and the organizers of the event for the fact that at an absolutely opportune moment, quite timely, we are discussing these challenges, and with the discussions here, they're trying to contribute to a national and European solution. There are funds, there are opportunities here for Health Digital Europe, as I mentioned. Of course, the Horizon Europe program. We have this agency that I hope will soon be functional, that will be hosted by Romania, that I think, at least as far as cybersecurity goes, will have the capacity to coordinate the resources for research. And the defense program as well, the civil component of the defense fund. We can find opportunities as well, and of course there are the cohesion funds, the resilience funds, where certain components that can have a component, as I said, in health and security can be tackled and funded. Thank you very much, and allow me to say again that I'm absolutely honored to be here with the distinguished panelists and members present of the audience. Thank you, Doctor. You mentioned challenges and strategies with respect to health and pensions. Maybe it wouldn't be bad to think of the education strategy, because what happens around us today links into education. The vaccination process, for example, not to mention what Minister Arafat said, concrete actions against the vaccination process. But even this reticence to the vaccination process brings us back to the education of a certain level of the population. Dr. Andrei Baciu, State Secretary, is one of the those present in the front line of fighting against COVID. Thank you, Rector. Distinguished audience, it's great pleasure and honor to be part in this dialogue today. Allow me to congratulate New Strategy Center for this exceptional event. The New Strategy Center really is a special tank of savoir-faire, and it really creates the opportunity of faire savoir. That is for all of us to reset our priorities, and we can't do this all the more taking into account what happened so far than by referring to and using such debates that bring together specialists at the highest level. Thank you, as I said, for the invitation, and congratulations, Mr. Scutaru, for the efforts of organizing this event. To answer the question that is really governing this panel, of course, the need is there. We all can identify it clearly. It's already 18 months into a crisis that started from the health sector and very quickly became social, political, economic, and we are here without a very clear definition on when this will end. Of course, security is, or health, better say, is not a traditional threat to international security and stability. However, this did not stop world organizations in really being concerned or being prepared for these situations. In 2014, the UN Security Council said very clearly that there is a direct link. Of course, it was in the context of the emergence of the Ebola epidemic. Said clearly that there is a link between health threats and stability and security. The international security and stability. This was a first red alert. Of course, internationally, there are such endeavors. At the beginning of the year 2000, when at the request of the Ministers of Health, an informal work group was created, an EU Security Committee, that has received great institutional powers in 2013, including at national, individual level. Several proposals were made, analyses. If, or in the case of a public health situation. Broadly, of course, we see that the need of a mechanism of tools that manage these new untraditional threats to national and international security, those elements coming from the health sector, there is a need to do it. I think that apart from the epidemiological, medical ones that are less known, there are experts and institutions that manage well at national and international level, at technological level, with respect to health, any type of public health crisis. Medicine is a very clear science in this respect. However, we are facing something new. Maybe it existed, but it didn't have the impact it has today. That is disinformation. All the more that disinformation can come and can lead or become societies that are already polarized, and can divide societies that are already polarized. And we see, for example, the issue of vaccination. This is not an easy topic. If the society that needs to adopt this solution or this decision as the only solution to exit the crisis already had issues with the vaccination, things are even simpler for those that are playing fatally with public health, as this happened in Romania as well. And the same, international organizations took this very seriously. The WHO actually became a new science. The infodemic has appeared, a science dealing with scientifically tackling this issue. The first conferences appeared, but undoubtedly we all see that health has become a central element that can destabilize and cause security issues at national and international level. I think these are the general issues that we all know more or less. But in the health sector, there are also other lines of discussion that are specific to the health sector. Medicine, as we know it today, will be completely different in 5 or 10 years due to technologies that exist today, as Mr. Bouchoi mentioned, as State Secretary Arafat mentioned. The appearance of 5G, of new technologies, will really artificial intelligence will revolutionize medicine. We actually see that this happens at a more advanced level. There are health systems focusing on implementing as much as they can the outpatient concept. So for, of course, pathologies that can be treated outside of hospitals to be treated as such, and most of monitoring chronic problems outside of hospitals is already possible through technologies, and the human resources are involved very little. But both in our country and at European level, significant resources are allocated. This is one of the first three important priorities. Digitalization, that has an important cybersecurity component, and a very important comment from me here is that is the one related to the beginning of digitalization in Romania. This was not such a great advance in Romania that we wanted. But during the pandemic, given that we're facing a disease that was airborne, we had to find solution to somehow find a physical or a distancing, and mostly this came from telemedicine as a solution. We could take prescriptions without going to the doctor. This is maybe the most obvious part for all of us, but there are very many. It's a microcosmos, almost, the field of telemedicine. But given the urgency that we've been facing since the 2020, the focus was on the speed to develop such tools. We didn't have time to really focus on the security as well, which, of course, created possible vulnerabilities. This is exactly why it is essential to consider and take a clear look at cybersecurity. And if there are still things that were not taken or treated as such, to be able to recover and to do what we didn't have time to do last year. Romania is not really a country coveted by cyber attacks. There is also public information in this respect. Hospitals and other medical institutions that are subject to ransomware attacks. So, ask for money in case, in exchange of returning the database of patients. If we went to a hospital, we have the details there. Fortunately, the state institutions could foresee such situations, and we didn't really reach a point where patient data would be made vulnerable or exposed. But this does not mean that we shouldn't get ready and prevent exponential threats that might come with respect to cybersecurity. Digitalization is the main concern or priority in the health sector. It will revolutionize medicine. The same should be for the cybersecurity component, to guarantee that all the data and advantages of technologies that emerge, that we will be implementing, the cybersecurity has to be the shield to protect the data, because this is all our data. I think these two issues must be quite a focus and to pay attention to them, because at the beginning of the pandemic it was a focus on developing tools and solutions, and there wasn't time to focus on the security component as well. We shouldn't believe that it can be led as such, because the risk is quite major, and only one mistake is enough to really lose credibility of all these advantages among patients that can easily lose trust in a technological solution, although it might be very useful and efficient. If, however, we cannot guarantee full security. What should we do from now on to somehow come to a closing of my answer? To become aware of the importance of an integrated approach in the health sector, but we have to institutionalize the effort to prepare it institutionally only any type of answer. Already, the state institutions have a great know-how in involving them in pandemic, and I think that this new know-how should only be the foundation of actions that should have started yesterday. We already have the foundation, the necessary know-how to be able to build, but nothing should hold us back, and believe that if nothing serious happened so far, the things will continue as such, because all these dimensions will expand at European level and in Romania as well, due to the financing opportunities that are really unprecedented in this field. So yes, we have to build a sustainable health system, and we have to boost its resilience exactly to be taken into account and taken seriously as a concept of the expanded security concept. I can get quite a lot in detail on the topic. There are very many examples that can be provided, very interesting, but broadly, I think this is what the priority number one should be: to integrate cybersecurity and to institutionalize the answers that the society and the system in Romania, the central administration, have to provide, because nothing will be very forgiving given the dangers to come. We will have to be prepared. Thank you for your attention, and of course I welcome your questions. Thank you. Thank you for your patience.
Thank you. As you mentioned, cybersecurity and information security, you quite insisted on it actually. I think we have with us a person highly able to provide qualified response. I invite Mr. Ioniță to deliver his presentation. Thank you very much. I am extremely honored to be here today with the ministers, a member of the EU Parliament, in this panel moderated by Rector Iliescu. My mission is not so difficult in my capacity as representative of the private sector. I don't have to provide an answer whether healthcare is a strategic component of the security environment, but I can provide the perspective of a private sector. I want to thank New Strategy Center for inviting me here. I am also an associate expert of New Strategy Center, so that would sound a bit strange, but I must assure you that in all the papers published by the New Strategy Center, we take into account the reality around us. I also prepared a presentation, some supporting slides for what I'm going to present. And let's take a snapshot what happened in Romanian hospitals during the pandemic. Obviously, all the information I'm going to present, all my appraisal comes from the viewpoint of cybersecurity. I have no qualification to make any other reference to the medical activities in the hospitals, but I'm only describing what we noticed in hospitals while monitoring the IT systems in Romanian hospitals. I kindly ask for your permission to extrapolate, because obviously neither Infoworld or Cymed manage all the IT systems of the more than 600 hospitals in Romania, but both Cymed and Infoworld have access and may provide analysis on groups of hospitals in Romania. What have we seen? throughout the pandemic. Physical access has been restricted, if not completely limited to the public in Romania. So there was a need to access there was a need for remote access to information. That means that people used more systems, apps, hardware, software to have access to the information, to see what happens in the hospital. There have been new equipment installed quite fast, obviously due to objective situations. As I mentioned earlier, the medical emergency prevailed, and when equipment or systems had to be installed in the network, maybe the IT expert in that hospital was not there or was not available, being busy with something else, but the medical emergency prevailed. The systems were installed so as to provide treatment as soon as possible, even at the risk of not covering the cyber security requirements. There in hospitals for an IT specialist means new identities, new credentials. If, for example, we have a new 10 emergency doctors in a hospital, obviously the IT specialist did not have the time to go to each and every one of them to create accounts and so on. Unfortunately, this could not always happen. Obviously, those people had to log in using probably the credentials of other people, and when you want to follow to trace what happened in a network, this becomes difficult. All in all, I would say there was a change in the user behavior. There was more interest in accessing information, and as I mentioned in other opportunities in the media, it was not the hackers who changed their action ways. They still act from home, but we changed our attitude. We changed due to the new context. We changed how we access information, how we interrelate using IT networks. It is certain, it is obvious that the security of IT systems has an immediate impact on the health of the healthcare system, with everything this entails, which was mentioned by previous speakers. Let's have a brief overview. If you agreed, as I asked you to extrapolate, and let's see the situation with the IT systems in Romanian hospitals. Again, speaking in terms of digital services providers, everything connected to the network is device, machine, working station, and so on. We could see, and we still see through the asset management, asset service management, we see very wide range in Romania, starting from several assets registered in the network up to a maximum of 643. We are speaking here about averages per category. We do not speak of specific hospitals. Also, if we speak of assets, we are also talking about a wide range of assets, from tens to hundreds, the average 200 assets. If we speak of users, again we are ranging from an average of several users to hundreds of users. Again, we did not include special cases. If we speak of 3 or 4 hospitals where we have 1,000 users, and this happens in Bucharest. I couldn't compare big hospitals like Baciu, for example, in Bucharest with the psychiatric hospital in Vaslui. But the law says that all hospitals in Romania are operators of special services, so they need to comply with certain security measures. I remember when I was the chair of the European Center for Cybersecurity, it was easiest to apply the measures in the healthcare field. No one commented when I said that one life is just as important as 100 lives, so it was easier to apply it there. In terms of number of logins, because obviously to be able to observe personal data protection where there is no legitimate interest to process such data, with the minimum necessary to identify the security threat with maximum data protection. So besides other services, the cybersecurity structures and the structure I'm managing, Cymed, we follow traffic logs, system logs, where we can see who does what and how the systems are used without being interested in the content. Again, we see here very different hospitals, from 15,000 logs collected per month up to 200 million. Just think, we are now managing 2 billion logs per month, which means that the traffic volume and the number of operations carried out in hospital networks increased a lot. In terms of hospital profiles, the logs can create trends. We see the 4 categories. The fourth is a special case. The traffic volume is large. We see the specificity. The peaks are maybe throughout midweek, and the free spaces between the peaks illustrate weekends. The traffic values during those periods are obviously much lower. Why do we do this behavior analysis in the networks? When we identify the natural behavior of a network, you can identify, in case of suspicious events or anomalies, you can create a security alert which should identify and prevent cyber attacks against hospitals. Obviously, in order to learn about that network, you need time, you need to develop with the beneficiary. It doesn't happen overnight. It doesn't happen with only one solution applied to all. In terms of operating systems, since we are talking about digitization and what happens next, just think the logs of the devices we are collecting logs from, more than 20 operating systems. There are many different ones, whether may they be Linux, Apple or Windows, and we have different types of apps. Again, the applications in the devices we are collecting logs from, not apps from the Google Play. I will move on further quite faster. I also found hospitals where we could know that had no equipment for us to collect logs from, so there was no, actually we had to identify solutions to bring their equipment to enable us to collect the logs. They needed to meet the legal requirements for cyber security. I believe neither I nor anyone else would believe that just passing a law would mean that the next day reality changes in Romania and firewalls are flying all over hospitals. Until then, we had to find smart solutions for our partners to identify solutions together and be a part of the digital future we keep hearing about. So this is a hardware we purchased as a solution to be able to collect logs until we identify the financial resources necessary to improve the situation. We were talking about smart solutions and the need to involve authorities. Maybe this is a premiere, what I'm presenting here, but things can be done not by the hospitals, not by the Ministry of Health, but by other authorities, which, as Mr. Arafat mentioned, should recognize that the medical system becomes more and more important and should, for example, and I will reiterate this discussion in a meeting of the new strategy center with ANCOM, we have to push providers, since they are to give the hospitals a speed for a traffic speed guarantee, so that since they have the obligation to transfer data and take actions to prevent security incidents, they should also be enabled to do that without us having to select or be able to decide which hospital traffic should prevail and restrict traffic. Also, the MPLS technology helps or would help hospitals with 6 or 7 locations, for example, so that they no longer have to buy 7 firewalls, but only 1. They should no longer buy 7 licenses and have I don't know how many experts to monitor them, but only 1. And then we are able to see the traffic speed. We talked about ransomware, about attacks targeting hospitals. I mentioned many times. We shouldn't take it personally. Those who attack us do not have anything personal against us. These are random attacks. They are launching encryption keys attached. The main method is obviously the phishing, and those who open that attachment would get it to the database. The problem is many people do not understand the chain. We have the people producing those encryption keys, the encryption software. We have regional dealers, local dealers. So local dealers, when they encrypt someone, and well, I'm exaggerating a bit just for you to understand better. If that beneficiary, or let's say hospital in this case, would be encrypted, would have their database encrypted and want to pay, there is a risk they pay and the local dealer no longer finds the key because someone intervened along the chain, interrupting the supplier chain. So it's not a solution to pay these ransomware. There is a solution, there are backup solutions. All hospitals, all our customers have such solutions, and they are smart solutions, not network solutions. So because then when hardware is encrypted, then it can extend to the entire network, and then they wonder what happened. Well, you did not use specialists. This is what happened. Then recently I heard in a business meeting, 70% of the hospitals in Romania are registered as operators of essential services. We are looking forward to see how many of them are able to meet the requirements, because the fact that you are just part of a list, I don't understand why this list is secret, because according to law, all hospitals in Romania, whether public or private, they are essential services operators, but then the list is secret. But again, we are talking about the change in mindsets again. But maybe authorities should focus on what matters or what can change the reality. First of all, They need to create criteria for service providers so that we have a reliable market of suppliers. Otherwise, the auditors for which the criteria were issued can only come there and validate with their audit what we know today, that there is a problem in the healthcare field. And I will end because I think I already exceeded my time. Digitization without cybersecurity will not help us avoid a strategic surprise. So if we further develop, digitize, bring equipment, install equipment without ensuring maintenance and monitoring, we will only have a wider surface for attack with more vulnerabilities, and obviously the hackers will benefit and exploit this further. Thank you, and I'm sorry if I exceeded my time. Thank you. You should not apologize because you presented much interesting information. We still have time for some open discussions. We already have Mrs. Alina Kulchak, who has requested to take the floor. She is head of the Association of Romanian Drug Producers. Hello, and thank you very much for this opportunity. I want to greet all participants, the panel. Even if I lose a few seconds from my speech, I have to congratulate a new strategy center, because I think we all agree this is an event with a special strategic importance, and I can only salute the presence of health care as an important topic here. As we know, we all believe healthcare is a topic, a field of national importance. Mr. Arafat, we all remember the initial months when the pandemic hit us all, and you were absolutely right in remembering all the crises we have seen there, the precursors crises, alliances between countries, the problems at all levels, geopolitical, financial, the crises of medical equipment, of drugs. And here I remember our experience in the pharma industry. For those who do not know us, we represent the most important 27 pharma companies with global presence, but present in Romania as well, producing innovative drugs. We are very happy that with the solutions you all know, the vaccines, beyond all the innovative drugs we are producing we were able to provide the solution which hopefully will end this crisis and bring back the freedom we all want. Getting back to those moments, it was very important to provide drugs to the population, and I remember how difficult it was. We all had to work from home. We had to reinvent ourselves so that we do not impact on the supply chain. It was not easy. There were government meetings, there were decisions to help or to unblock trucks in the customs. I have to admit, there were people who were extremely efficient in the Ministry of Health. I have to thank them because they were very efficient and they responded to everything we asked very quickly. I think Mr. Baciu remembers this. I want to thank you again because I believe together we managed to avoid a drug crisis which could have been very unpleasant for the healthcare for the Romanian people at the time. So you mentioned strategic partnerships, and there were unprecedented partnerships to bring in vaccines in Romania, partnerships between pharma companies, governments, the European mechanisms was initiated back then, but we have also seen many countries which realized the importance of a strong pharma industry in that country. countries like France, we have seen a public information, President Macron inviting pharma company representatives in a discussion to see what are the necessary measures to strengthen and attract investors, to strengthen manufacturing in that country. Austria also took action for this goal, and Italy. Then our question is the pharma industry a strategic partner? Can it be, having regard to everything that happened in the past year? And if yes, what can we do together to delete the history of the past years? Because we all know in the past 10 years we have seen a coercive policy applied to the pharma industry here. So thousands of drugs have disappeared from Romania. They are not present in the market today. And pharma companies decided to withdraw from Romania. If we want healthcare as a strategic topic, if we want the pharma industry as a strategic partner, what can we do to recognize this as such? Thank you.
Întrebarea este foarte importantă. Da, industria.
I think it's a very important question. Yes, the pharma industry is a very important component in the health sector, and it has an impact on national security if we think of the vaccination industry, for example. Here, take a seat, please. Here I'll refer to aspects that we've been through and that were really subject of discussions in certain circles. Let's take the example of Constanta Institute in Romania, a vaccine factory, so to speak, that slowly stopped. But in 2009, the pandemic that had a very quite a lower impact now, for which the Constanta Institute could provide vaccines to Romania and to 2-3 other countries, as opposed to now. The pharma industry is a strategic partner, but it's not only on the European NATO level, but world level as well. Take a look at this pandemic. Some countries managed to purchase large amounts of vaccines, others did not. But we have to admit that if we do not solve the problem in the other countries as well, and if we only solve the problem partially here, the risk of variant strains that do not react to our vaccines was higher. So yes, nationally, regionally, health should be considered as a national security aspect, but for our security we have to understand that we have to insist in other parts as well of the world to cope with situations that can have a direct impact on the entire globe. And take a look at Ebola. In 2015, Ebola started started as a disease in an area that became worse, and it started to spread. Then 3 countries were impacted until the army was sent from 3 countries to help to provide medical equipment, medication, and so forth. The disease could not be contained there, and now with this current pandemic, we confront an illness that has limited death, impact on the health sector. The patients reaching a ICU come in high numbers because this is our capacity. I don't want to believe or to think what happens if 30 or 40% of patients reach ICU, or with 30-40% mortality. There were viruses with 30% up to 50% mortality rate. They didn't spread as the current virus spread now. But I have to come back to the pharmaceutical industry. Yes, it is a strategic industry. We have to have current discussions and create these partnerships and really see both perspectives, which will be our desire in this partnership to have what we need when we need it, and not just in our region. We have to think of the capacity to create certain medication, certain vaccines for an entire globe, not just for this area or that area, because we can't be isolated. We are not in a glass bubble. When something happens somewhere, it quickly reaches us, and it is very difficult to stop or contain that disease if we don't treat it globally. And we see, as it happens in this pandemic, in certain areas the impact is currently limited because there is vaccine, but if there's a strain that no longer reacts to the vaccines that were created, until we create new vaccines, we'll face again a new major problem worldwide. So that is why the pharmaceutical industries have to adapt and find solutions and to bring it back to our areas as well, not just to depend on a certain geographic area, as I said, on the precursors. And I have to say that the French Parliament had this approach 2 years ago, and it was discussed in the French Parliament that these things happen in two countries. If one of the countries can no longer export, not because I don't want to give you, but because it can no longer produce it, how will they produce the drugs in Europe? So maybe in this case at the EC level we can think of this. Maybe it's not easy to hear what I'm going to say now, but the competition and state aid, all of these aspects have to be rethought, because a factory, a center such as Cantacuzino is really strategic, and when you fund it at the state level, this is no longer state aid, but is financing strategic resources that we have. So really, Cantacuzino Institute cannot go bankrupt due to market reasons, and it has to be kept as such. And these are things that have to be thought of all over, economically speaking. And coming back with a short answer to your question, yes, the pharmaceutical industry has to be in a strategic partnership with the states. Thank you. Thank you. If I may, a small comment. This is also an approach at the European level. There is a European pharmaceutical agency looking for exactly this, a strategic partnership, giving the possibility, capacity, regionally speaking, to produce everything you need. Of course, we speak of molecules now, but the same applies for vaccines as well. There are 11 countries at European level that produce the vaccines against COVID-19. It was actually a European discussion to expand this production capacity to the EU level. Vaccines that are not only used here, but all COVID-19 vaccines used within the EU are produced in the EU. Moreover, the EU has become, or the member states have become, vaccine exporters. So vaccines used in other parts of the world are produced in the EU. However, it's also important to develop a strategic partnership with the pharmaceutical industry at the local level for all these very important examples. However, the European effort should also be taken into account, and this is what I wanted to refer to. Thank you as well. Although we did exceed a bit the time, given the urgency of the topic justifies it, I would like to thank the speakers again and congratulate the organizers, and of course thank the hosts as well, that for a second year in a row have given us this opportunity. Let me remind you that Constanta was a host as well, and I do extend the invitation again to come to the seaside as well, maybe in the spring at the seaside and in the autumn in Bucharest. And I now continue saying, may you continue to be in good health, sorry. All the best to you.
So